Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you are watching NewsX. Well, let's take a look at some of the top stories. U.S. Presidential Envoy Steve Witkoff will lead a delegation to join Gaza ceasefire and hostage talks in Egypt tomorrow, according to Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati. Meanwhile, Qatar's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Majed Al-Ansari has criticized Israel for failing to halt operations in Gaza as outlined in U.S. President Donald Trump's peace plan. Hamas has reported positive 4-hour indirect talks with Israel in Egypt aimed at Gaza truce, saying they are working to surmount all obstacles, according to sources close to the negotiating team. The world watches as the two-year war, which has killed 67,000 Palestinians since the October 7, 2023 Hamas attack, seeks a lasting peace. The Ukrainian drone strike has killed 4 civilians on a highway in the Russia-occupied part of Kherson, according to Moscow-appointed Governor Vladimir Saldo, who has reported the attack targeted civilian vehicles. This comes amid escalating strikes, with Russia reporting it intercepted 209 Ukrainian drones overnight in Kursk, Nizhny Novgorod and Belgorod, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. Ukrainian Energy Minister Svitlana Hidinchuk has announced a plan to increase natural gas imports by 30% for the 2025 to 2026 heating season. These escalating attacks raise fears of gas shortages in Ukraine, with priority given to securing imports for November-December this year. France's outgoing Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu begins last-ditch talks to save his cabinet after resigning on Monday following rejection by allies and opponents. President Emmanuel Macron has tasked Lecornu with rallying cross-party support amid a fractured parliament. Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa has reportedly met with Kurdish leader Mazloum Abdi in Aleppo, marking their first meeting since July following deadly clashes in Kurdish-majority districts. The meeting was also attended by U.S. envoys Tom Barak and Admiral Brad Cooper, focused on the stalled implementations of a March agreement. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is traveling to Washington for his second-year visit this year to restart stalled trade talks with U.S. President Donald Trump, with Canada the only G7 nation yet to secure a trade deal this year, as Carney now faces pressure to secure a deal. Pope Leo XVI will make his first trip as pontiff to Turkey from November 27th to 30th, including a pilgrimage to Iznik to mark the 100th anniversary of the First Council of Nicaea, the Vatican has announced today. Following this visit, he will then visit Lebanon from November 30th to December 2nd. Now we start with the Middle East. Qatar's Foreign Ministry spokesperson has said that the details of U.S. President Donald Trump's 20-point Gaza plan still needs to be finalized. Speaking from Doha, Majed Al-Ansari has said that Qatar is neither optimistic nor pessimistic about the negotiations, but remains committed to the plan. Let's in fact listen into what he has said.
تتكون من 20 نقطة. تقريبا كل هذه النقاط هي بحاجة إلى تفسيرات تطبيقية على الأرض، وهو ما يحتاج طبعا إلى تواصل مع جميع الأطراف. كما تعلمون جميع الأطراف الآن موجودة هناك. لا يمكن وضع أي تعبير سواء كان متفائلا أو متشائما أو غير ذلك على المفاوضات. المفاوضات جارية. نحن ملتزمون بهذه الخطة بالشكل التي عرض، ملتزمون بالوصول لنهاية لهذه الحق. الآن الوقت مبكر أن نحن نتحدث عن أي بدائل لأي خطط. نحن نتحدث عن تنفيذ هذه الخطة وتطبيق هذه الخطة. الأطراف جميعها وافقت على هذه الخطة، وبالتالي ليس هناك الآن حواجز من حيث الموافقة على 20 نقطة التي وردت في خطة الرئيس ترامب. العقبات الآن هي في التطبيق.
On the ground, Israeli tanks, boats and jets continued pounding on Gaza, denying Palestinians any respite on the anniversary of the deadly October 7 Hamas attack on 2023. This comes as indirect negotiations between Israel and Hamas progress in Egypt, addressing crucial issues such as Israel's withdrawal from Gaza and the disarmament of Hamas. Although there have been no breakthroughs, both sides have endorsed the overall principles of President Trump's plan, which seeks to halt the conflict, free hostages, and allow humanitarian aid into Gaza. Now, for this discussion, we're joined by Professor Kobi Michael. He's a senior researcher at INSS and Misgav Institute, joins us live from Israel. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. So far, what do we know about these 20 points, which have been agreed and which have not, and what are the sticking points, if you could clarify that for us?
Hello, thank you for having me. I think that the main problem or the main challenge that all sides are trying to deal with right now is the first article of this 20 articles program, and this is the issue of the hostage releasing. I think that the article in this regard in the plan is very clear. Hamas has some difficulties with this article. Israel is not going to make any concessions with regard to this article, and I think that everything eventually is dependent on this article, the fulfillment, the implementation of this article. The official negotiation actually began, but it is negotiation in the technical level, not yet the leaders themselves. I mean, the heads of the delegations, and this I would say is a sort of preparations towards the real negotiation. And each side, mainly Hamas, tries now to gain more benefits or advantages with regard to this plan. And as I said before, I think that everything eventually is dependent on the first article, which is related to the hostages releasing.
And building on that, what is or who is Hamas suggesting when they say a body of independent Palestinian technocrats to rule Gaza post-war?
I think that our point of departure must be that Hamas does not intend to give up on its presence and influence in the Gaza Strip. Because Hamas perceives itself not as a partner of Fatah or the Palestinian Authority, but as a replacement of those. And Hamas understands pretty well that without having a sort of holding or presence or influence in the Gaza Strip, which is the major or crucial strategic asset for them, they will face severe difficulties in the West Bank, and this will weaken them. So this must be our working assumption, and therefore I really doubt the option that Hamas will be willing to dismantle itself from its weapon. I am more skeptical with regard to the option that Hamas will be willing to demilitarize the Gaza Strip. And I'm not too impressed when Hamas says that they are willing to support a technocratic committee or government, because as long as they will keep their military capacities, they eventually will influence any form, any alternative governance that will be there. And I think that this is what they have in mind, something like Hezbollah model that we knew in South Lebanon. And therefore I think that even if we will succeed in implementing the first phase of the plan, which is the release of the hostages, we are going to face some very difficult and I would say challenging problems with regard to the other articles of this plan.
Thank you, Professor, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. In Gaza City, 2 years of war has left deep scars. Smoke rises behind damaged buildings as residents walk through destruction. Displaced Palestinians carry their belongings, seeking shelter in tents and schools. Let's listen into some of the displaced Palestinians.
تابعها عن كثب وهناك بارقة أمل بأن المفاوضات ستؤتينا بفرج قريب وتنتهي هذه المقتلة وأن يتنفس السكان هنا الصعداء بعد عامين من القتل والتشرد والتجويع ونقص في الغذاء والماء والدواء.
هذه إبادة جماعية، إبادة إنسانية. الحرب لحتى الآن إحنا بنعاني منها من فقر، بنعاني منها من مجاعة، بنعاني منها من تشريد، بنعاني منها من جميع أنواع الشغلات اللي بتخلي البني آدم يكش من نفسه. يعني زيها زي البني آدم اليوم تطلع فيه زي اللي ميت وزي اللي عايش.
بيتنا فقدنا سيارتنا، فقدنا مصدر الدخل اللي كان إلنا اللي هو السيارة، وفقدنا أراضينا، سبنا أراضينا في جباليا، في جباليا ومكان عيشنا، وطلعنا على غرب غزة. في غرب غزة كمان ما فيش حاجة، فيش كان دخل إلنا ومصدر عيش إلا زكيم، وزكيم كان كل يوم فيها موت، فكان الإشي معاناة أكبر. إيش لما أودي ابني أو جوزي يجيب لي أكل من زكيم وكل يوم يجي بدي الأكل كم شهداء، فكانت هذه معاناة أكبر.
Now for this discussion, we go back to Professor Kobi Michael. He's a senior researcher at INSS and Miskav Institute. Joins us live from Israel. Thank you, Professor, for staying with us. Now, looking back at this war and the negotiations, what can the current negotiations and negotiators learn from the past failed negotiations as well as the Oslo Accords?
There is a huge difference. First of all, this negotiation is, I would say, very contained to a very specific area, a very specific event or crisis, and this negotiation is, I would say, an outcome of an American initiative led by the American president. All the prestige of the American president, all his determination is in this plan, in this negotiation. And therefore, I think that there are huge differences between this round of negotiation and the previous rounds. When it comes to the Oslo Agreement, if you are going to Article 19 of this plan, which talks about reopening the path towards the establishment of an independent Palestinian state, just reopening the path, not establishing a Palestinian state, you can find a sort of a similar organizing rationale to the Oslo Agreement. But I think that all of this plan is concentrated mainly on the Gaza Strip, and in the eyes of President Trump, this is the path towards his grand vision, his regional vision, the idea of creating or establishing a new regional architecture that cannot be done without ceasing the war in the Gaza Strip. So here it's not, the Oslo Agreement was a bilateral agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. Here we are talking about sort of a multilateral event. We see the Turks and the Qatarians as mediators, which are empowered by the Americans, and we see that the intentions eventually of the initiator of this plan, who is President Trump, the intention is a regional intention and not necessarily, and not most importantly, the Israeli-Palestinian bilateral level.
And Professor, lastly, as we send our prayers and condolences to the victims of Hamas's 2023 attack, in Israel, how are families reacting to the 2 years without any significant breakthrough in these negotiations?
Look, the 2 years anniversary is a very, I would say, troubling and and sad day in Israel. And the idea that there are still hostages held and kept by Hamas in the Gaza Strip is something that eventually just adds to the sadness, or adds to the I would say the unrest of the Israeli psyche when it comes to the Israeli society. I think that this is a very deep and open wound in the fabric of the Israeli society, and by the way, it will remain such even after the release of the hostages. The entire event of this barbaric attack of October 7th is something that will remain as a very deep scare in the Israeli psyche for generations to come. This is not an event that the people of Israel will forget, or this is not something that the Israeli society can move on as if it is a historical event. Not at all. Things have been changed dramatically in the Israeli attitude, in the Israeli psyche, and I think that this is something that will affect dramatically the attitude of the Israeli public with regard to any future agreement with the Palestinians.
With that, I would like to thank Professor Kobi Michael for joining us and sharing your insight on this topic. And now we stay on this topic. In southern Israel, visitors gathered at the Nova Music Festival memorial site to mark 2 years since the devastating October 7th, 2023 attack on that day. Hamas targeted young festival goers, killing over 1,200 people and taking 251 hostages back to Gaza. Among the victims remembered were Yuval Baron and her fiancé Moshe Shua. Let's listen in to what their family has said.
Supposed to get married on February the 14th, Valentine Day, and both of the family decide, because actually they found together and they brought them together. The fuel will be together. We will not separate them. So we decide to make together the fuel, and also they were buried next to each other because they were never separated. So we can't separate them. Nothing else is important. Nothing else is can be complete, because she's my heart, and they took it from me. I can never be happy, complete, ever again.
Families of the victims continue to grieve deeply, keeping their memories alive through portraits and flowers at the site. Meanwhile, Israel's ongoing military campaign in Gaza has launched, and in response to the attack has resulted in more than 67,000 Palestinian deaths and widespread devastation in the Gaza Strip. Now we stay in this region. Syrian Defense Minister Muraf Abu Qasra held a meeting with Kurdish leader Mazloum Abdi. After the meeting, the Syrian Defense Minister has announced that they had agreed to a comprehensive ceasefire with the Kurdish forces. In a social media post, Syria's Abu Qasra wrote that a ceasefire had been agreed on all fronts and on points for military deployment in north and northeast Syria. He further added that the implementation of the deal would begin immediately. There has been disagreements between the Syrian government led by Ahmed al-Sharaa and the Syrian Democratic Forces over power centralization and regional autonomy, which sparked clashes earlier this month. Now for this discussion, we are joined by John Rossomando. He's the president of Viking Research Associates and geopolitical analyst, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, John, for joining us again. Good to see you. Thank you. Now, given this complex dynamics between Syrian government and Kurdish forces, how do you assess the significance of the ceasefire in terms of Syria's broader territorial political stability And do you think this could hold, or is it just a temporary measure?
Well, I think it depends a lot on Turkey, particularly because Turkey has a lot of influence over the interim government in Damascus. There are serious differences, not just in regional autonomy, but over the vision of Syria. Uh, the HTS government in Damascus wants an Islamic theocracy. The Kurdish, Arab, and Syriac Christian coalition in the northeast wants a secular civil state. And then also you have the massacres by jihadists loyal to the regime in Damascus of Alawites and Druze that has the Northeast administration reluctant to give up its arms.
And since you have mentioned Turkey, given U.S.'s alliance with both Kurdish groups and Turkey, how might this ceasefire affect Washington's balancing act in the region?
Well, I think that the Trump administration sent a strong message to Al-Shara at the UN that he has to leave the Northeast alone, and that he has to respect the minorities. So I think that they're sending a message. President Trump is a strong ally of Erdogan's and has given him great deference, but I think that Secretary of State Rubio sent a strong message.
And how will the U.S. military's role in Syria be impacted by the ceasefire between Syrian government and Kurdish forces?
Well, I think things will remain unchanged. I think you have the status quo. The U.S. military's interest is ensuring that we don't have a resurrection of the ISIS caliphate that we had a decade ago. So I think that they'll remain there for the foreseeable future.
Do you think if U.S. could use this influence to help shape a lasting political resolution, particularly in Syria under Ahmad al-Shara's leadership, or should it take more hands-off approach?
Well, I think the United States has to be a more active player in mediating the different factions, because you have a fundamental difference in terms of the goals of each faction. Al-Shara wants Islamic theocracy and Arab supremacy. The minorities want a federal Syria like you have in the United States, and like in India, where you have your federal government and your state governments.
And how can U.S. balance between supporting minority groups such as the Kurdish groups or the Kurdish autonomy while ensuring that Syrian territory stays integral?
Well, I think that's really up to the Syrian people. I think there should be a plebiscite as to the future of Syria. Let's not forget that the borders of the countries in the Middle East were drawn by the British and the French. They're not like natural states like you might have elsewhere in the world, because back in the 1920s, the the Druze were proposed as a separate state under the French rule.
And what's your analysis about the current leadership? Some might have criticized Ahmad al-Shara's government for not giving enough seats or voice to minorities.
Well, I think that you have a very strong Arab nationalism and Islamic Sunni supremacy going on that is supported by Turkey. Turkey wants a centralized, one-party state in which the minorities have no say.
And what were the immediate triggers, going back to this news, what were the immediate triggers that led to this recent flare-up in Aleppo between Syrian government forces and Kurdish units?
Well, you ended up having, both have been on edge against each other for weeks. and you ended up having skirmishes. And I'm glad to see that you have a ceasefire on this, because it just shows how fragile the peace is in Syria. It's very easy for the country to go back into full-out civil war.
How do you think that minorities will react to a new government and the ceasefire that has been agreed? Do you think they would be supportive, and do you think they support the current government under Ahmad al-Sharaa?
They don't support it, because it hasn't shown that it's any different than what you had during the Syrian civil war, where you had one gang fighting against another, causing mayhem. I mean, you've had genocidal war crimes against the Alawites along the coast back in March. You had the genocidal attacks by jihadis against the Druze over the summer. So I think that al-Sharaa is going to have to learn how to be a compromiser.
And what's the significance of this particular location, Aleppo? How has the control and governance of Aleppo changed since the toppling of former President Bashar al-Assad?
Well, Aleppo is a diverse cosmopolitan city with a large Kurdish population, which is why you have Kurdish SDF forces there, alongside HTS government forces, and they fought against each other throughout the 13-year civil war.
And what more can you tell us about the ceasefire agreement that has been reached? Are there any measures that are being taken to ensure the minorities' safety?
Well, I think you have a deconfliction for now, in which they've agreed not to fight. I hope that cooler heads can prevail, and that Mr. al-Sharaa will learn to compromise, having a strong central government, but with respecting the rights of local governments to carry out municipal and police functions.
With that, I would like to thank John Rosamondo for joining us for this discussion and sharing the insight throughout. Thank you very much, John. Now we move on to Europe. A building partially collapsed in central Madrid near the Opera House today, leaving 3 people injured with one in serious condition. Authorities have deployed firefighters and ambulances to the scene, where sniffer dogs are being used into the search for any potential victims. The building, which appears to be under restoration, has collapsed without warning, and it is still unclear if anyone is still trapped inside. Emergency services are still working quickly to assess the damage and locate any missing persons. This is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.